Author Karen Hodges Miller is joining us on WRCO Radio. We're talking about the book, Hibiscus Strong, and kind of looking over your family history. It's a very fascinating subject, Karen. And I guess, how did you first get the idea that you wanted to do this?
Well, people are surprised, but I basically say I planned to write this book my entire life. Literally, when I was 8 years old, I wrote in my diary that I was going to write a book about my family. And then it took me another 50 years to do it. But I started, the book is written as a lot of interconnected short stories. And the first short story I actually wrote was for a high school assignment. So, yes, so it's been in the works a little bit.
So the high school assignment is a part of the book then?
The story that I started as the high school assignment is in the book. It got, it changed and improved from my high school writing style. But, yes, it is there.
Give us the insight into the title, Hibiscus Strong.
Okay. Well, I am from Miami, Florida. And I am someone very unusual. I am a third-generation Miamian, and there are not a lot of us around, particularly at the age I am, because Miami is a very young city. It's only about 125 years old right now. And my family was all from Miami, and Florida just seems to grow very quirky characters. And as I was thinking about writing the book, and I was thinking about steel magnolias, but magnolias are kind of a bland, white, pale flower, and no one in Miami would ever claim to be bland or pale. And so I thought about hibiscus, and I explained that we are the women in my family are kind of like hibiscus. We are strong and ready for anything, and you always, if you grow up in Florida, you always have to be ready for the alligator at your front door, whether it's a real one or a metaphorical one.
Uh-huh.
So,
some different challenges than here in Wisconsin, in other words.
Yeah, but we don't do snow.
Yeah.
We're like, alligators, no problem. Yes, snow. Don't give us a flake.
A problem, yeah, exactly. Well, while you were digging, you found some interesting things, some footnotes about your family history. Could you tell us about some of those? Well,
that almost, when you say that, it almost makes my mind go blank, of course. But some of the things is, and some of these were stories that my family told. But my great-grandfather was the engineer who drove the first train into Miami and the first train into Key West. And he also had a story that he told the family. He was an engineer on the train when during a hurricane. And he swore that the wind blew so hard that the train actually blew backward down the tracks. And so I talk a little bit about that, and I am not sure I really believe the train blew backward down the tracks. But that is the way the story was always told in my family. So, yes.
And you had a grandfather that was a plumber, is that correct?
Yes. My grandfather was the plumber, and he happened to have been the plumber for Al Capone. And Al Capone had his summer house on one of the islands out in Biscayne Bay, and Star Island, I think it was. And my grandfather would always say he never met Al Capone. He only dealt with Mrs. Capone, and Mrs. Capone was always very polite and always paid in cash.
Oh, interesting.
So yes, he actually enjoyed working for them because it was always cash.
Oh, I'm sure of that. What were some of the tools you used to go back and find some of these things, because they're not all written down?
Well, first I'll say, again, my family are storytellers. We've always told stories. So a lot of this I would hear from at family parties and things. But then I decided to write it, and I would think about something, and I would realize I only had part of the information, or I couldn't remember exactly when something took place, and so I started using Ancestry.com, which is wonderful. If anyone is going to look up their family or write about their family, I definitely suggest it, not just for the basics of, when somebody was born and when they died. You can find all sorts of little tidbits that people have put on it. And, for example, and this is one I just found, and I'm still researching to this day, but something I just found on it was one of my great-grandmothers was arrested, basically living with someone who she was not married to.
Oh.
And I'm researching that and finding out more about it. And I'm starting to think there could be a book too here.
Awesome.
So, yeah, what was that all about? I've got to find out more. But I would suggest that everyone, number one, when you have your relatives, and we just passed Thanksgiving, but if you see your relatives at Christmas, start asking them their stories. Collect the stories, and then just keep researching. Ancestry.com, newspapers.com is another one, and I was described as having the obsessive-compulsive subscription to newspapers.com. It has newspapers literally from around the world. Some go back a couple of hundred years, and it is a great place. The only thing I will tell you is if you have a common name like Miller, it can be a little more difficult. The part of my family with the more unusual name, Saweja, was much more easy to research than the Miller, Hodges, Rogers portion of it, because there's so many Millers in this world.
I bet. So one of the most important things is to kind of get that family tree established then, in other words, right?
Start with the family tree and then go to the hints on the family tree and look at things and take the time to read what other people have put on, and take some of it with a grain of salt, because one family puts something up and it gets there, and not necessarily they have a chance to put their own stories on that are possibly true and possibly not. But yes, and then there's another site called Fold3, fold3.com, and that is for military history. And I did a lot there. And interestingly enough, I was given that site by an author friend who has done some Civil War biographies. And what I've learned is if you're researching the Revolution or the Civil War, Fold3 is actually better than for World War II, because there was a large fire at a warehouse where, back when documents were all paper, where a lot of the World War II documents were stored. And so a lot of World War II documents about people are just not available. But still, you go on and you see what you can find, and it's truly, I can just, if I have 15 minutes, I can go on Ancestry and start looking somebody up and always find something fun.
Well, what's interesting is somebody listening today might say, well, I don't have any interesting stories. My grandfather wasn't a plumber for Al Capone or anything like that, but I guess we never know till we start looking, do we?
Well, you don't have to, but my family always said nothing, there's nothing interesting. In fact, my mother's comment always about the fact that my great-grandfather had driven the train into Miami, the first train into Miami, was too bad he wasn't Flagler, the tycoon who owned the train. It was like, yeah, no, nobody in my family did anything important. They didn't do anything famous. They were just average people. But it's not about doing something important. I think it's just about having a sense of the story and turning something into a story in the way that we talk when we are at the dining table.
You could find out some things that you don't really want to know, too, couldn't you?
Well, yes, like I said, I've got some great-great-grandparent who apparently was living unmarried with someone, and I'm still trying to find that one out. Yeah, I do think that you will find things out that maybe you don't want to. My family's from the South. A lot of them lived in Georgia. If it's going to bother you, if you want to find out that your family owned slaves and you're from Georgia, don't be surprised. That's not particularly acceptable today. But I also had family that fought for the North in the Civil War. So I've got all sides, and yeah, there's always things you might not want to find out. I found out one uncle was divorced. He had been married to a showgirl in the 20s in Chicago, which was never mentioned. That was one of those stories that never got mentioned at family dinner. So, yeah, there's always things that you learn. And, hey, if it happened to someone who's alive today, it's embarrassing. If it happened to a great-grandparent or earlier, it's a fun story.
Sure. I know. I read in your notes that you were scared to show it to your sister. What happened?
I always swore I would never write this book until I was the last man standing in the family. And I got convinced that I should start writing these stories. And I was terrified to show my sister because she and I are the last ones who remember these people and these things. And I was sure that she would remember things differently. I think I shouldn't have said certain things. And she loved it. She thinks it's wonderful. She's giving it to people, although there are some people she won't give it to because she says she doesn't want them to see, like, a picture of herself as a child. But we had a great time laughing about some of the stories, and then she's reminded me of other stories that I had totally forgotten. And that's the thing. Each of us, my sister and I are very close in age. We were at all the same family gatherings and same events. But what each person in your family picks out as important and remembers is different. And they each see it from their own view. So even if you think that you're the one, you know this story, you know it back and forth, someone else will have a different view of it and maybe see it in a different light.
Who's the bathing beauty on the cover of the book?
That is my grandmother. And the thing about that, and if you turn inside, the inside the front page is the original black and white. The funniest thing about that is she hated that picture. She always hid it away, and we kept her several times from destroying it. But she was in a beauty contest in Miss Miami in 1922, and she won Miss Photogenic, and she was not given any money for it, but because she won this contest, she got to do a lot of photographs for advertising for Miami. And this was one photograph that she had kept, and then I gave it to a graphic artist who turned it into something incredible for the front cover of the book.
Fascinating stuff. Do you teach memoir writing, on a continual basis?
Yes, I do. I teach writing of all kinds, and memoir is I have worked with a lot of people over the years who are doing memoir, and the first thing I would say people need to realize is they think about memoir as just sitting down and telling the story of when they were a child, but a lot of different books that we write have some aspect of memoir in them. Even if you're, say, writing a business book, you're going to be telling stories of how you were successful in business, which is essentially part of memoir. So unless you're, writing some fantasy from another world, you probably have a little bit of memoir in whatever you are writing.
Well,
and I like to make sure people understand that.
How can people get a hold of you, Karen, if they would like to contact you?
Okay, well, there are several ways. The easiest one is my email, khmiller10@gmail.com. That can always get me. They can find out about Hibiscus Strong at hibiscusstrong.com. And obviously go to the website and on Amazon. Go to Amazon and look up Hibiscus Strong. And my company name is Open Door Publications. So opendoorpublications.com will get you to my website. So I have lots of ways you can find me.
After Hibiscus Strong, is there another book coming out?
Well, I was having problems with that, thinking, well, I've told all the stories. What else is there to do? But I'm starting to decide that I do have more stories. It's not fully formed in my head yet, but there will be some more stories about my family, yes.
It's interesting. And I think, all of us probably have a book in them about our family history, don't we?
Yes. And like I say, you don't have to have done something interesting, and you don't have to have done something dramatic. And I work with a lot of people who had something traumatic in their past that they want to write about. And I would say you don't have to have anything particularly traumatic either. Just think about your family and start writing, and before you start writing, start talking to your family.
I think the other thing is there are so many stories about our families, just how they persevered. And you talk about the Great Depression, how our ancestors came through that and survived. That'd be a good place to start, I'm sure, wouldn't it?
Well, and not just the Great Depression, a lot of different stories. And we keep, over Thanksgiving, we kept hearing about how it was going to be such a rough Thanksgiving with families if they talked about politics. Well, when it gets, instead of talking about current events, ask each person to tell a story from their childhood, no matter when it was, and ask them each to tell a story about their own childhood and then about the oldest family member that they remember. And I think you'll be amazed at the stories that you'll hear. I think it could make something really enjoyable for a holiday dinner.
I think so, too. And I think about the younger generation. I've said this before on the air, that I think storytelling is kind of a lost art. We need to kind of bring that back, don't we?
Yes, and whenever my sister and I came home, let's say we'd gone camping with the Girl Scouts, and we lived with my mother and my grandmother and my grandfather, and they would all be sitting at the table, and they would say, tell us everything that happened. Tell it to us blow by blow. And that meant that we were supposed to tell from the moment we got in the car to the moment we got back out of the car in every little detail. That was how I was raised. You were to tell everybody at the dinner table everything that had happened during your day or whatever event that you had just come to. So that's how I learned to be a storyteller.
Good start. The book is Hibiscus Strong. Karen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Karen Hodges Miller joining us on WRCO as we talk about writing our own family memoirs. Maybe that's a good New Year's resolution for you.